Good afternoon. Let's play rapid game number 2. Eventually. Quick pairing, 10-0 rapid, there we go. Hopefully it'll be a little bit better game than last time. Okay, I've got a 1700 rated opponent. He leads with e4. I'm going to try the perk defense today, d6. And it's a hyper-modern opening, so I'm going to play knight f6, g6, bishop g7, and castle kingside. I don't know what I'm supposed to do after bishop to c4, but I guess figuring that out will be part of the fun. Maybe white will play d4 here. Oh no, he needs to protect his e4 pawn, so he'll play probably knight to c3, maybe d3, and the game will go on. In the perk, as in other hypermodern openings, the idea is to develop your pieces, get your king castled, and then counterattack what presumably is white's expansion in the center. I think because this bishop is on c4, we're sort of set up for what's called the fork trick. At some point I can play knight takes e4, and after knight takes e4, d5, forking the two white pieces. And while that won't result in the gain of material, it's a way for black to kind of equalize the game sometimes. Let's go with bishop to g7. And I want to play the fork trick, but I want to get castled first. So if we see something like knight f3, castle kingside, I'll play knight takes e4 at that point. h3, okay. Not sure that move was necessary. Knight f3. And it looks like it's time for the fork trick. So knight e4, d5, bishop d3, de4, bishop e4. And then I think I will play knight d7 to f6 to get the light squared bishop off of this diagonal. And hopefully claim at that point that I have achieved something like equality. Alright, again, normal is for white to save the bishop rather than the knight, and to recapture on e4 to regain his pawn. Yep, there we go. And as far as I understand it, black wants to send this knight over to f6, and that's because if this bishop is not forced to leave e4, it's difficult to figure out what to do about white's tension with the b7 pawn. So knight f6, and if I remember correctly from looking at this stuff with computers a long time ago, c5 is usually a desirable move, so we'll play that next. Although I wonder if I have to prepare that with something. I don't know if he can just take the pawn. So c5, d takes c5. Can I go queen a5 there? Bishop e3, knight d5. It looks like it gives me play for the pawn, so I don't think I have to worry about a capture on c5. And in general, in these openings in which white's d-pawn goes to d4, c5 it can be responded to with d takes c5, but it's usually not something black worries about. Okay, so I said I was going to play queen a5, and after bishop to e3 protecting the pawn, I was going to move my knight to d5 attacking the bishop and attacking the pawn on b2. I'm also thinking about bringing my rook to d8 to put it opposite the white queen, which might create some favorable tactics at some point. Can I move this? Oh, okay. I want to adjust. I'm not used to this whole recording thing yet, and I want to adjust this so that you can see my time too, but apparently that's not working out this game. whatever, I'll figure it out and improve in the future. Okay, so while white is thinking, I'll point out again that I just want my pawn back, and that I want to put some pressure along the d-file with my kingside rook. At some point, I'd like to get this rook to the c-file. Just have to figure out what to do with this bishop on c8. I guess I could bring it to e6. I have a lot of arrows here, don't I? Let's get rid of some of these. I could put it on e6, or I could go d7 to c6. On e6, it blocks an attack by white along the e-file, protecting my pawn on e7. But on c6, it puts pressure along the long diagonal. Okay, maybe this is smart, actually. Yeah, I didn't even think about this, but this makes sense to me because it's a way to give back the pawn while doing some damage to black's pawn structure. Do I want to throw in the move rook d8? Is there any value in that? It would turn this into a gambit, I guess, because white could take on b7. But I'm just going to take the pawn back to get material equality and continue from there. Alright, so now I have the ability to play bishop a6 and trade light-squared bishops, which might be good if for no other reason than that I don't have an obvious thing to do with this bishop otherwise. And his bishop on d3 is a pretty good piece. Be nice if I could play rook d8 first, though, because then we'd have a lot of pressure on this square. Okay, bishop d2. And in my experience, sometimes when you have your queen on a5 and it gets attacked, it's a reasonable idea to shuttle it over to h5. So is that something I want to do here? Maybe, but I could also just put the queen on b6 so that I'm hitting this b2 pawn, which means my move comes with tempo. He may play rook b1, but that gives me time to play bishop to a6. And if queen b6, bishop e3, queen takes b2, rook b1, I have queen takes a2. I don't think he'll have compensation for the pawns there. So queen b6. Rook b1. And we're going to go bishop a6. And at this point, if he trades for me, I'm going to retake with tempo because his a pawn will be hanging. If he doesn't trade for me, rook fd8 will put a lot of pressure along the d-file. Yeah, I didn't think about this for some reason. Okay, bishop e3. I mean, c5 I don't think makes sense because he can trade on a6 and then take my c5 pawn. If I take his a2 pawn, he can take my e7 pawn. I think that's better for white. So, what if I just retreat the queen to b7, and now that his bishop's on e3, maybe knight d5 later will be an issue for him. Let's go back to b7. Alright, I want to think about what white can do to improve his pieces, though. Maybe this knight on f3 can be brought into the center effectively. Alright, there's no concern with the queen on b7 though, as far as I can tell, so I'm going to put it there. And now that I have a pawn on c6, by the way, instead of bringing this rook to the c-file, I want to put it on the b-file. So the plan is to put one rook on the d-file and one on the b-file. Alright, I have a pretty natural rook fd8 here, which threatens bishop takes c4 because his bishop is pinned. I have to be a little bit careful coming up about him playing b4, b5. But for now we're just going to play rook f to d8. Now I'm kind of noticing some unfavorable tactics after queen a4. My bishop is pretty darn awkward on a6. Although queen a4 drops the bishop on d3. What am I talking about? Alright, let's see how much time I have left. 5:32. And he sticks his queen on e2. Yeah, and I no longer have knight d5, so I think this c4 move was good from him. Let's get the queen out of the way, which will allow me to redevelop the light-squared bishop. I'm going to put the queen on c7 with the idea that I'm now in charge of the f4 square. Maybe I can go knight h5 to f4. My pieces are reasonably well developed, but I'd like to stick this guy on the b file. Yeah, I'm not super concerned about that, but should I be? He can play b5. So if I go knight h5, b5, bishop to b7, he'll have b6, ab, bishop b6, with a skewer. And if I play knight f4 at that point, I don't know. So maybe bishop b7 right away. And then if he plays b5, I can trade on b5 and play bishop b7. I can also play knight h5, b5, and trade on b5, and then play bishop b7. And he'll have rook fc1 or rook bc1. And I'll have queen d6 with tempo. And in fact, if he plays rook bc1 there, my queen d6 will be a double attack. So let's try that. Knight h5 to f4. This kind of opens up my dark squared bishop, which might have some benefit. Okay, I'd love to go knight f4 now, so if that works, I'm going to play it, because I'd like to have my queen on f4. But he can trade and play queen takes e7. So maybe I should play e6. There's also rook d3 maybe, queen d3, but then there's no rook d8 after that. So, alright, let's just play e6 and continue from there. Oh, I'm way low on time, so let's start playing faster, which is not exactly my specialty. Very likely to lose on time, at least if my online history is any indication. Yeah, I thought I was in pretty good shape at one point, but it seems like white has recovered from that and turned the tables on me. Okay, we're going to go knight f4 here. And we're just looking to trade and get the queen onto a better square and get the queen off of the same file as this rook on c1. I think if I can get him to take on f4, which he now has to, things are once again looking pretty good for black. The queen's on a very good square. I've still got pressure on d3. He can play b5, but I'll take and bishop b7, and then I've got a threat to double his pawns. Yeah, so we're going to take here, and bishop to b7. This strikes me as a very good position for black now. Nice bishop, nice rook, nice bishop on g7, nice queen, and a threat. Also got some tension here, so he will, well, if I take on f3 with my bishop, we end up with bishops of opposite color, but I immediately get to invade, and that kind of looks appealing to me. So let's do that. Bishop takes f3. How much time do I have? 2:24. Okay, so I'm ahead on the clock now. And what I'd like to see him do is just take back on f3 with the pawn, because that, hopefully later on, will give me some kind of attack on the dark squares, whereas he doesn't really have an attack on the light squares. Alright, let's go queen d6, threatening to take this bishop, keeping an eye on this diagonal. What should I do next? I guess activate the remaining rook. Okay, I could also go queen d2, but let's play this move. I don't have much time. Maybe my rating is not going to be particularly high online, and I say that because this 1700 is giving me a really hard time. I don't know, I've never been very good at online chess for some reason. Okay, now that that rook is gone, I'd like to put my queen back on f4, my bishop on e5, and somehow deliver checkmate. And I am looking at the c1 square as well. If he plays queen e3, which may be a good move, maybe I'll just slide my queen over to h5 with the idea of bishop e5 to f4. I'd also like to, let's get rid of some of these arrows. Yeah, okay, so I said queen h4. And of course I threatened to take this pawn. Oh, I actually have bishop h6 as well, which regains control of the c1 square and avoids any tactics that might come from having a hanging bishop on this square. After bishop h6, he can't defend that pawn, so let's go ahead and play that. This guy's hanging, so I want to keep that in mind. If I ever need to make a retreat with the queen, I'll be able to do it with tempo. Okay, we're going to take a pawn here. He trades queens, but we now have a pawn, which is obviously a good thing. Let's go rook here with a fork, and we went on time. Okay, so that was a successful second game, but a much more difficult one than the first one, and I hope you enjoyed watching it.